Hey guys. So let me get started by telling you a little bit about me. I've been in web development for a little bit over 15 years. I ran a design development agency building on the LAMP stack for about 10 years. Right now I'm a software engineer with Bstock, and I've been there for about 3.5 years. And I'm on a team of about 25 engineers. We primarily use the LAMP stack there. My specialty is probably the front end, although recently I've been building a back-end microservice with Node.js. I am a self-taught programmer. When I'm not coding, stuff I like to do: photography, travel, creative writing, hiking, dancing, philosophy, metaphysics, astronomy, astrophysics, long walks on the beach. So the agenda for today, I'll talk about the interview process in the tech space, and I'll give you guys some general interview tips. I'll talk a little bit about some red flags that I see when I'm interviewing, and we'll talk a little bit about soft skills and what we're looking for as a tech company, at my company. I have a little section for free code campers and self-taught programmers. I thought that would be relevant for you guys. I'll talk a little bit about my interview process, and that includes both the phone screen and the on-site interview. So the interview process in the tech space, what does this look like? Usually at my company, and this is pretty much across the board, you will have a phone screen with maybe a technical recruiter. Usually a phone screen lasts about an hour. After that, with my company, you will have a second phone screen with an engineer. Now this is not all companies, but it's possible that you will have a phone screen with an engineer. Once you pass those two phone screens, you'll be invited into an on-site interview, and this is a full-day interview. The way that we do it at my company, and this is going to vary from company to company, is you will have an interview with 2 engineers at a time. Usually they're senior members of the team. You'll have, after those interviews are over, you have an interview with the director, and then you will have an interview with our VP or CTO. So some general interview tips. These may be not specific to the tech industry, but these are things that I wanted to mention today. First of all, understand the role that you're applying for before you get on that phone screen or walk into the on-site interview. Really understand the job description and what the company is looking for before you walk in. Do some research on the company. Get on Google and look up the company website. Read about what they do, what they're about, what their philosophy is. It's good to have this understanding of who you're interviewing with before you actually speak to somebody at the company. Dress well. So there are varying opinions on this topic. In Silicon Valley, which my company is based in, it's not uncommon for people to walk into an interview in t-shirt and jeans. Personally, I would like to see someone well-dressed when they walk into an interview. That means throw on a suit, maybe put on a tie, put on your shoes. Women, closed-toe shoes. It may not hurt you if you dress down for your interview, but it's definitely not going to hurt you if you dress up. What it tells me when you walk in well-dressed is that you care about this position, this interview, that you have respect for the company, that it's very important to you, so you're trying to put your best foot forward. Eat before and not during your interview. So we usually have breaks in between the on-site interviews, and we will let people, use the restroom, get a drink, grab some snacks or something. So one day I had an interview, and this girl took us up on the offer to get something to eat in between the interviews. And she spotted a box of cherry tomatoes in our fridge, which is fine, but throughout the entire hour of our interview, girlfriend was popping these cherry tomatoes. And I couldn't concentrate because I kept thinking, what if she squirts at me? It was really awkward. So if you're gonna get something to eat at your interview, do it, get something light, get a granola bar, eat something small, try and eat well before your interview. I know this is silly, but it really is relevant. And ask thoughtful questions. So if you Google, everybody knows you should ask questions at an interview, right? When they say, do you have any questions for me? You should ask something. But if you look it up on Google, you'll see the same questions over and over. When I'm interviewing engineers, I'm hearing that very same question, 10, 15, 20 times. That tells me that you Googled it. that doesn't tell me that you actually have a question for me or about my company or about the role. So try and find something relevant, an actual question that you have to ask about the company or the team or the job that you'll be doing. Be prepared to demonstrate understanding of skills listed in your resume. Sometimes I will see people come in and they list themselves as a senior engineer, but then they have no idea what they're doing. It's fine to be a junior. It's fine to be entry level, but come in with that presentation of yourself. This is who I am and this is where I'm at. That's fine. Practice coding challenges and study algorithms. It's 99% guaranteed that you will be asked to do a coding challenge or solve an algorithmic problem at an interview, so study these ahead of time. There's nothing that you can do on the spot if you're not familiar with a coding challenge, so it's really important to spend some time before you start interviewing, just kind of looking at the more popular ones, solving them on your own, practicing them. And after the interview, thank the interviewers for their time, send a follow-up thank you email that afternoon or the next day. This is kind of old school. We used to be taught this at school when I was back in the dinosaur ages when I was in school. But I think that those people who take the time to thank me for breaking up my day to meet with them for this interview, or that send a note through email, later that day saying, thanks for your time, I appreciated you taking time out of your day. It makes me feel like they recognize that the interview process for me actually took some time out of my day because, when you got your head in code but you have to stop for an interview, it's kind of distracting. So I just appreciate when somebody reaches out like that. And again, it may not help you, but it's definitely not going to hurt you. Next up, some red flags. And these are things that I have seen. First up is please don't BS me. If I ask you a question and you don't know the answer to it, don't try and sound like you do. Just tell me, you know what, I'm not really sure. If I was faced with this in a real life situation, this is what I would do to find the answer. Perfect. That is a perfect answer for that question. I don't expect anyone walking into an interview to know every answer to every question I have, but I do expect you to be able to find the answer. Know and admit what you don't know, explain what you do to find the answer. Second, please at least attempt to answer my question, even if you don't know the answer. So this shows me that you're trying to work through the problem in your head, right? Maybe you don't know the answer, and again, that's fine. But don't say, I don't know. That's not really showing me that you're trying, so try to answer the question. Please don't be arrogant and condescending. This one is a little bit tricky because when you walk into an interview, you want to be confident, right? You want to look like you're confident in what you know. At the same time, you don't want to send a message that, I know more than you. I had an interview once with someone who was a senior JavaScript person. And I introduced myself at the beginning of interviews so people know what my proficiency is. And I did mention JavaScript. He proceeded to explain to me what strings and variables were. That didn't make me feel like, really warm and fuzzy. So try to communicate what you know who you're interviewing with, know what their proficiency is, so that you're not kind of talking down to them. Soft skills. We all hear about soft skills. So what are they? Soft skills, thanks to Google, personal attributes that enable someone to interact effectively and harmoniously with other people. So these are the kinds of things that cover soft skills. What qualities are important for your job or your team to have? These are asking you about your personality, what you're looking for. What are your strengths and weaknesses? This is something that you should think about before you walk into an interview and be prepared. Behavioral questions. Tell me about a time when. I might ask you, tell me about a time when you were working with someone and you had a really difficult time working together. How did you resolve that situation? So one of the methodologies that you can use to answer this question is called the STAR methodology. And it's just an acronym to help you remember the steps, right? First, you describe the situation that you were in. You talk about the task that you were given, the action that you actually took, and the results of that action. Okay. So this will help you to like really be thorough in answering these questions about tell me about a time when. Okay, next up, what we're looking for as a tech company. So when we're interviewing, we're looking for, do you have proficiency in whatever language it is to the level of the position that you're looking for, right? This is a no-brainer. This is pretty much basic stuff. Are you a good culture fit? And I know that this is really important at my company. A lot of the engineers that I've talked to at other companies here in Oklahoma are very much the same. This is a big deal for a lot of tech companies or tech teams. Now, this isn't something you can prepare for. It's not something you can study for. You either are or aren't going to be a good culture fit with the team. But know that it is something that's really important, and it should be really important to you too. We want to know, can you explain your thought process? So working on a team of engineers, you're going to work with people a lot. You're going to have to communicate a lot, whether that's verbal, right, explaining what you're thinking of doing, explaining what you're working on, or maybe through the form of comments. When you comment your code, which I hope everyone does, you want to be able to communicate what your thought process was while you were writing that code. So as we're interviewing, we're looking to see, are you able to communicate your thoughts? Are you a good culture fit? Put this in a second time, because this is really important to our company, and I really wanted to emphasize this. Do you seem willing to learn from and share knowledge with internal and external partners? So when you work on a tech team, chances are you're not going to be working alone. You're going to be working with other engineers, but you're also going to be working with other teams, right? You're going to be working with maybe marketing, maybe the UX team, maybe you're going to be working with product. So are you able to talk to other people about what it is you're doing? Can you share your knowledge with them? Are you a good culture fit? Surprise. Will you be able to work well in a cross-functional team? Again, because you'll be working with other team members in other departments, we want to know that you'll be able to communicate with people who aren't necessarily tech-oriented, may not know the lingo, that you can still explain yourself and be able to work with them. Are you a good culture fit? So I'm really emphasizing the culture fit because this is something that's really important to us and to a lot of companies. So this is my section for free code campers and self-taught programmers. How many of you do not have a CS degree? Okay, that's most of you, actually. All right. So I grabbed this from Stack Overflow. This is a 2019 survey. And if you see at the bottom, worldwide, about 3/4 of professional developer respondents have the equivalent of a bachelor's degree or higher, consistent with what we've found in previous years. However, it is not that rare to find accomplished professional developers who have not completed a degree. So guys, we fall up here. Hell yeah. This is something to be proud of. And that said, I wanted to talk for a minute about imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is real, whether you're self-taught or not. This is a screenshot from a Slack conversation that I had with one of my seniors last week. Laith, I think I'm just going to take up basket weaving. What? I think I asked dumb questions in the Node channel. It hits everyone. You are never going to know everything about the technology that you're in. You will always be learning, and there will always be someone that knows less than you do. So actually, I find imposter syndrome to be a good thing. It means that we're not comfortable at our level of knowledge, right? It kind of drives us to keep learning. It makes us feel like there's more for me to know. I gotta know more. So look at it as a positive thing. On the other hand, you may be judged for being self-taught when you're in an interview. Somebody may look at you and they say, oh, this guy doesn't have a degree from MIT or Stanford. In that case, nothing you can do about it, right? That's kind of a them thing and not a you thing. Okay? There's nothing you can do about that. Don't even worry about it. You probably don't want to work at a company like that anyway. So I wanted to also mention confidence and humility. So this is a topic when you're walking into an interview. You want to have both confidence and humility. In the West, we kind of look at confidence as more is better. The more confidence you have, the better you are, right? But, and this is personal opinion, people may have argument with me on this, confidence does not equal proficiency. What confidence does equal is I am competent enough to teach whatever it is that I know. Humility, on the other hand, does not equal inadequacy. Humility means I am still a student. So while confidence says, I know stuff, humility says, can you help me learn this stuff I don't know? Courage says, I know stuff and I will show you. There's also this other stuff I could know better. Might you help me learn? So there's kind of a marriage of confidence and humility. So when you walk into this interview, I'd like you to walk in with courage. I think that courage is a better word to summarize both of these aspects than confidence or humility. And that is my Yoda slide for the presentation. Does anybody know who this is? Susan Boyle, who said it? What does Susan Boyle do? She sang. So let me give you a little, for those that don't know who Susan Boyle is, you can see she's kind of frumpy, she kind of looks a little dumpy, right? She was this British woman who was on Britain's Got Talent. It was maybe 10 years ago or so. She walked out kind of stout, she was a little awkward looking. She introduced herself and they asked her, the judges asked, what are you doing here today? And she says, I want to sing. And people kind of laughed at her, she was all awkward and weird, and they were like, whatever. And they said, like, who do you want to sing like? And she mentioned, I don't know, some famous singer. I don't know who that was, but it was some famous singer. And everybody just bust out laughing at this woman because they're like, really? Well, let me tell you what. Girlfriend opened her mouth and started singing. And I have chills right now remembering the sound of her voice. Okay, she was so impressive. She had such a beautiful voice coming out of this really awkward woman. So how is this relevant to you guys? I'm telling you, channel Susan Boyle. When you walk into your interview, you're walking in without a degree from Stanford or MIT. You are self-taught programmers. Channel Susan Boyle. CS degrees set a level of expectation. I know when somebody walks in with a degree, what they have a proficiency in. I know what their level of expectation was to be able to graduate. But if you're self-taught, tell me that and then wow me, because you can, right? My level of expectation of somebody who's self-taught is probably not going to be as high as somebody who's got a CS degree. So you have this opportunity to be like, all right, judge me, but now look, this is who I am. Okay. So this is my interview process, the phone screen, and I don't spend too much time on this because this is pretty brief. It's about an hour. What I usually do is I'll introduce myself, I'll talk about my current role and my areas of proficiency. Again, I do this so that you know who you're talking to and how, what vocabulary you can use with me, right? If you're, say, a Python engineer and you're talking to somebody who's front end, they may not be as familiar with the syntax of Python, so, it kind of gives you an idea of who it is you're talking to. If you interview and the person doesn't tell you who they are, what their role is, ask them. Just ask. Because this is going to be relevant for how you're speaking about what it is that you do. Then I will move to, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your current position. Tell me about your programming languages of choice. After we get through this conversational part of the phone screen, then I move on to technical questions and an online coding challenge. Technical questions I actually brought with me today, and if we have time at the end, I will throw out a couple of the questions that I usually ask, just so you get an idea of some of the different things that you might be asked on an interview. So the on-site interview, if you pass the phone screens and then you get to the on-site stage, this is usually what it will look like. Now this is how I do it, but it's pretty common throughout the industry. It's pretty much standard. I'll introduce myself again. If the interviewer doesn't introduce themselves, ask them about their role in the company so that you understand who they are. Introduce yourself. This is commonly where the interviewers will start, right? Who are you? What are you doing now? What is your current role as a developer? I'll get back to this in a minute. How many of you are currently not developers? All right, I got some stuff for you guys. I'll ask about your soft skills. Tell me about a time when. Right? I want to know what you're doing to improve your skill set. You guys are free code campers. You've already got something for that, right? I want to know why you're here interviewing. This is a common question that you might be asked. So what is it about the company that you liked? What appealed to you about the position? Why are you here? Then the whiteboarding and coding challenge. Right? This is something that I'll also talk about later. And then it usually ends with questions for me, questions for the interviewer. So who I am, this is pretty much the spiel I gave you guys at the beginning of this talk. You know, I'll talk about my experience, my previous experience, what I'm doing at my company. Then when I talk about who are you, and I ask, tell me about your current position as a developer. Okay, so there are two paths we can go here, right? I'm currently a developer, some of you guys are, or I'm currently not a developer. So I'm going to talk about both of those and how to handle that question. So first I'll go with the easy path, right? Tell me about your current position as a developer. When I ask this question, I'm trying to gauge several things. I want to know what your level of knowledge is and your personality. Are you a culture fit, right? Is your role at your current position reflective of what you've told me in your resume? Does your skill level meet the requirements of the positions we're looking for, hiring for? Do you work well within your current team structure? And is it comparable or different to ours? Maybe you work in a small team environment, you're in a team of 5, and our team is 25 plus. You know, what is your situation? How do you feel about working in a bigger team? How well can you explain what it is you do? Again, communication. Are you going to be able to explain your code? Are you going to be able to explain your thought process? So tell me about your current position as a developer. Now, this is the other path, which most of you fall into. I'm self-taught and I have no work experience as a developer yet. Okay. So Alex, thank you for this. Alex on Slack said, I think transitioning can sometimes be seen with suspicion, which I think comes from unfounded bias. People change their minds, they find new interests. It doesn't mean they're flaky or have short attention spans. I could not agree with this more. And that is because I'm self-taught and I come from a very different background. So if someone said to me, you know, I'm not working as a developer right now, my next question would be, cool. So why did you decide to switch to a career in tech? If you're not asked this question, volunteer the answer anyway. Work it in. Okay, this is important. Things you don't want to say, I want to make lots of money, yo. Oh, my job pretty much sucked. It seems like the place to be right now. I don't know. Okay, these are things you don't want to say. So what are the things that you do want to say? I have a serious passion for technology. I've always enjoyed coding. I started coding as a hobby and I got super excited about it. I love problem solving. I'm looking for someone with fire. Okay. Fire is what's going to sell you, your knowledge and your fire. Remember Susan Boyle. So when I ask, or if you're not asked, this is something else that you want to work into your interview. How do you think your previous experience can make you a better coder? So you're thinking your experience, you know, might not be relevant. But when you're asked about your current role, if this is not a follow-up question, take the opportunity to explain how your experience will benefit you and the team if you join. Okay, so I'm going to use my own personal example for this, just to give you an idea of how I would work it into an interview. So first out of high school, I worked in the wire transfer department for an international bank. Seems so irrelevant, right? But that industry was very time sensitive and it was a high risk, high pressure environment. This is something that's going to be beneficial when I'm a developer on your team. I was also an assistant manager of Kinko's, which is now FedEx Kinko's, I guess. And that taught me how to work with difficult clients, right? It helped me to develop empathy in order to understand our users. So you're just really spinning it. You're spinning what you do to make it relevant to what you're trying to do. And then I taught high school social studies. So how is this relevant to engineering, right? So it prepared me for working with juniors as a senior or a team lead, right? It gave me the tools that I needed to learn how to work with people who needed to learn stuff. So find a way to, and you need to think about this before your interview. If you're not a developer now, you want to think about what it is that you're doing now that will bring value to your new position. All right, guys, whiteboarding. So whiteboarding petrifies me. Petrifies me. And I'm not sure that there's anyone in this room that it doesn't intimidate just a little bit, right? The idea of getting up in front of your colleagues, your peers, or people that you hope to be your colleagues, and solving a coding challenge. I just want to make a brief statement about I refuse to whiteboard. I have heard this, I hear it, I've heard it over the years. There are people who will say, I refuse to whiteboard. I'm not doing an interview where they ask me to whiteboard, just not doing it. When you start out, don't do this. Don't refuse to whiteboard. Because if a company wants to see you code and you want that job, you need to whiteboard. If you're in the industry 10, 15, 20 years and you want to refuse to whiteboard, by all means go for it. But in the beginning, be prepared to whiteboard. And when you do get into that whiteboard part of the interview, know that the interviewer probably wants you to succeed. When I'm watching somebody whiteboard, I'm usually sitting there like cheering for them in my head. Come on, you know how to do that. You know, I see what they're writing and I'm hearing their thought process and I'm cheering for them in my head. So don't walk in feeling like they're setting you up. They want to see you struggle. They want to see you fail. Most of the time, they do want you to succeed. Follow the interviewer's lead. If you start coding something, and they kind of diverge you and want you to go in a different direction, don't be hell-bent on continuing what you were doing. Let them tell you the direction in which they want you to go and follow their lead. Maybe they want you to write something in a different way. Follow their lead as best you can. Show what you know, don't code to impress. So if you are interviewing for, say, a JavaScript position, and you are not familiar with fat arrow functions, now is not the time to start using them. Code what you know. Code the way you're comfortable. It's not the time for you to try to be like, you know, the showstopper or the superstar. Just get it done. This is like brute force time, okay? And on freezing up and, oh my God, I know how to do this. So these are two kind of opposite ends of the spectrum here, and I'll help you out with this in a sec. This is how you should deal with either, I don't know what to do, or yeah, I got this. You want to use the Reactive Method. And I grabbed this from Full Stack Academy. This is, again, another acronym to help you remember the steps while you're whiteboarding. So I would suggest before you even start this process, you just take a minute, take a deep breath, because you feel like you're on stage right now, and this is the moment of truth. Right now is when you have to perform. So it's kind of intimidating. Take a moment, take a breath, take some notes. Write it down on paper, write it in your IDE, write it on the whiteboard, wherever you have to. Just make some mental notes for yourself as you think through the problem. Okay, just in case even if you know what you're gonna do, you might freeze up halfway there, and you're like, oh my God, I can't remember where I was going with this. So kind of hash it out right away. So the Reactive Method is, the first thing you want to do, once you're given the challenge, is repeat the question. Ask for clarification. If you don't get what they're asking you, ask. Okay? Make sure that you understand what it is that they want you to do. Then give some examples. These are the types of inputs that the program will take, and this is what the expected outputs will be at the end when the program runs. Then talk out possible approaches. So I could do it in this way, or I could do it in this way. You know, this is what I'm thinking. Talk about it. So then you're going to write your actual code. Okay. Sometimes pseudocode is okay. I've had people ask, you know, do you want me to pseudocode this, or do you want me to actually write the code? Depending on how complex the challenge is, you may not have room on the whiteboard to write the whole program. So just ask. You know. The important part of whiteboarding is that you know how to think through the process and you're going to get it done. It's not necessarily that you have the syntax down or that you have beautiful form. It's more about getting the problem solved and getting the program functioning. After that, you want to run through some tests. So in TDD style, think of some tests that you would run your program through. Talk about it, right? You're not going to actually write the test, but you're going to talk about it. This is the input that I'm, expecting here, and then the program is doing this, and by the end, this is the output that I expected. Or maybe you run through your program and you realize that you don't get the expected output. Fine, just say that. Oh, I just realized this isn't going to work. This is what I have to do to change it. So at the whiteboarding part of the interview, they just want to see your process, right? They just want to see you write code, figure out problems as you run into them, and see how you're going to solve them. Because nobody writes a program perfectly the first time. Believe you me, I have yet to do it. If you have time at the end of the whiteboarding challenge, you might want to do some optimization. You want to make it dry. For anyone that doesn't know, don't repeat yourself. And at this point, you might try to do something to improve the time-space complexity. Normally, when we give whiteboarding challenges, we don't get to this point. We usually run out of time before the person has time to do this. Again, follow the interviewer's lead. Sometimes they don't want you to spend time on this, sometimes they do. So just talk it through. So an example of a whiteboarding challenge you might be given, and there's been a lot of chat about this on Slack lately, Fizzbuzz is a very common coding challenge. And what Fizzbuzz is write a program that prints the numbers from 1 to 100. For multiples of 3, print fizz instead of the number. For multiples of 5, print buzz. For numbers which are multiples of both 3 and 5, print Fizzbuzz. And I added there a book that you might want to check out, Cracking the Coding Interview. It's a great book with coding challenges if you want to practice. So let's say this is you and you're in your coding challenge and you're given Fizzbuzz. So, Fizzbuzz, okay, I know I could solve this by writing a for loop, but I could also write a function that takes arguments so that it's more flexible. So you're thinking this to yourself, right? So this is your interviewer while you're thinking. Okay, what I'm going to suggest is you be this guy. You say it out loud. So this is what I'm thinking. I could write this by writing a for loop, but I could write a function that takes arguments. That way it's more flexible. Do you have a preference? Ooh, this is me. I'm excited because not only did you talk it out, you asked me if I had a preference which way you went. Of course, I should also add, if you don't know how to do both, don't offer it. So questions for the interviewer. So after you've gotten through your whiteboarding section of the interview, this is pretty much near the end, questions for me. And some examples of those are, can you tell me about the dev team structure and process? This tells me that you're interested in our team. You want to know if we're going to be a culture fit for you. So not only is it important for me to know you're going to be a culture fit with us, it's nice to know that you care if our team is going to be a good fit for you. So this is a great question to ask. What would a typical day look like for me in this role? Right? You want to know what your day-to-day operations is going to look like. Can you tell me about your team culture? Again, going back to the culture question. What do you like most about working here? People love to talk about themselves. Just ask me. When you ask somebody what they love about their job, you know, it does give you insight into what the company is like, what their day-to-day is like, and you may learn something about the company that makes you go, ooh, I don't really want to work there. Or it might be something that gets you excited about becoming part of the team. So it's kind of like when you move into a new neighborhood and you ask the neighbors, hey, what do you like about this neighborhood? You know, it gives you some insight into what's going on there. What kinds of challenges are your team facing right now? Everybody likes to talk about their challenges. This would probably give you insight into some of the things that you'll be working on, and it'll give you insight into what the struggles are of the team, what they're working on right now, you know, what obstacles they're running up against. Are there opportunities for professional development? I love this question. I love to hear this question, because that tells me you want to go to conferences, you want to learn stuff, you got the fire, right? That tells me that you're interested and you want to continue to develop yourself, that you're not like, yeah, I know how to code some stuff, I'm done, right? I want to know that you're interested in growing. What are your expectations around my accomplishments in the first X months in this role? I like this question too because it tells me that you're thinking about what are the kinds of things that you see me working on, where should I be in a few months from now? And it tells me that it's important to you what your team members are thinking and what their expectations are of you. This is also a great question to ask anybody who's in a more senior role, like your director or the CTO if you interview with them. So, recap. That was quick. So, we talked about doing research the company that you're interviewing with, Be conscientious with your dress, with your thanks for people's time, with your meaningful questions. Be ready to demonstrate your skills. Practice common coding challenges and algorithms. Know what you know what you don't, and know your resources. This is a big one. Self-taught versus formal education. So bring the fire, right? Channel Susan Boyle. Relate your previous experience with the dev role. This is something you got to think about beforehand, so prepare this. Behavioral questions, you're going to use the STAR method. Whiteboarding, you're going to use the Reactive Method. And wrapping up the interview, ask thoughtful questions that show your interest and desire to grow. And all throughout, be courageous, right? My Yoda slide, be courageous. So that's all I've got. I am happy to take any Q&A. We have some time left. I do also have some sample interview questions that I can share if there's time.
Testing.
I was curious, before you got this role, did you have any personal interviews with other companies, and how did they go? And part of the reason I'm asking this, I had a personal interview, this is 5 years ago, where it was a very small startup, so less than 20 people, and they were true business casual, so not a jacket, but all that.
Yes.
And I got this interview in a different manner. I just met people, so I didn't go through the initial phone screening. And because I knew them a little bit more personally, they actually did say, they were kind of questioning my dress. It was too much.
That you were too dressed. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have heard that before. I think this goes back to know the company that you're interviewing for. In smaller startups, and when I started with Bstock, I actually started with them as a contractor about 10 years ago. And when I started with them, they were very small. The team was about 10 people. I think the engineering team was me and 2 Russian guys. So yeah, if I had shown up to an interview with them in a suit, it might have looked a little weird, especially because it was Silicon Valley. I think that in Oklahoma, it's a lot more conservative than Silicon Valley. So I would tend to be more dressed here than there. But again, it really goes back to the company that you're applying for, trying to get a sense of what their culture is and what their values are. And again, I think if you're overdressed, I think that that's going to hurt you less than if you're underdressed. You know what I mean? Erring on the side of caution, I think it's better to be a little bit overdressed than underdressed. But great question. Anyone else? Yeah, you can just ask it. I'll repeat it.
Yeah, I had a question on the part, on the coding challenge, whiteboard especially, or even a code. What's your thought on some companies that do that type of coding challenge, but it doesn't necessarily pertain to the position or your job?
Okay, yeah. So the question was, if you're interviewing and you get a coding challenge that is not really relevant to the job that you're applying for, and what's my position on that? I think that there are some companies where you'll walk in and you will get a coding challenge that is an extremely difficult algorithm, something where they're looking for people to show their what's the word I'm looking for? Prowess, but more than prowess. It's a little bit more of a, I don't really have a PG way of explaining what I want to say. Sorry? Chutzpah. Not so much chutzpah, but more like you're bragging about, or you look how good I am. They kind of put you in a position to maybe, it's sort of condescending, right? I personally feel that coding challenges like that are not appropriate. There are companies that do it, though. And I guess that's the point at which you should decide if obviously you're going to try to do the whiteboarding challenge, right? Whatever the question is, you're going to try to work through it. But the sense around that question, if it's not relevant to the position you're applying for, and you feel like they're just kind of trying to make you dance, that's an uncomfortable situation, right? They're not actually testing you on what you know for the job you're going for. They're testing you on how well you can dance. And that kind of, I don't like that. So I guess to answer your question, you do want to do the challenge, but I think it tells you a little bit about the company culture if you're getting a challenge that's not relevant to what you're applying for. Does that kind of answer your question?
So
Yes.
when you are interviewing prospective candidates, you're trying to do like an assessment for culture fit, are there like key points that you look at from a personality standpoint, or how exactly would you gauge that? It's really subjective.
That's a great question. So the question was, when I'm interviewing someone, how do I gauge whether or not someone is a culture fit? Is there something that I look at as a measurement? So I guess personally for me, because I've been with the company for so long, I am really intimately familiar with the culture of my team. But beyond that, we do have company values and philosophy. So, and this is also why I suggest you do some research on the company that you're applying for. Because if it's been outlined in a company philosophy, chances are that's the culture you're trying to fit into. So that is something less subjective that I can use to kind of gauge whether or not someone is a culture fit. That was a great question. Not that I'm suggesting that you pretend to be someone you're not, obviously, when you go into an interview. But before you even get to the interview, maybe you read the company values and you're like, dude, this place is not for me. The research part before you get to your interview is going to be invaluable to knowing whether or not you want to work there. It's not just about, oh, can I get this job? It's about, do I want this job? Then can I get this job? A great question. Anyone else? Okay. So what I can do now, if you guys are interested, is I can run through some of the questions that I'm asking. Let's see, how many of you guys are front end? Okay, who's back end? Back end, JavaScript? PHP? All right, well, I will throw out some questions. So these are some of the questions that I'm asking. They may or may not be relevant to you. What I try to do is I will try and engage what role it is that you're applying for. And even if you're applying for a role that I'm not necessarily proficient in, I will be on the interview because, again, programming in general, actually I got some general programming questions that I can ask you. Programming in general it's language agnostic, right? It doesn't matter what language you write. There are some basic concepts that you should know. So let's see, I've got some junior dev, we don't want to ask those. So general programming. So here's one of my questions. Now, if you guys interview with me, I'm going to have to change my questions. So why would you use triple equals instead of double equals? Does anyone want to try to answer that, or should I just run through these? Yeah, go for it. Okay, you want to make sure that the values are exactly the same. So you would use the triple equals, right? Let's see. Then I will ask questions like, have you worked with Vagrant or Docker? And in what ways have you worked with them? What did you like and dislike about them? So this is more of a conversational question. If you haven't worked with them, okay. If you have, why do you use it? Why did you use it? What did you like about it? Just to kind of gauge your experience with it. What can you tell me about object-oriented programming? What is it? All right, I don't want to put you guys on the spot. Let's see. Explain the concept of loose coupling in programming. Y'all got some homework to do, okay? So what are the main features of object-oriented programming? Clearly, I'm using object-oriented. I write a lot of PHP, and we do use object-oriented programming. Our main product is built on a monolith, which is an MVC structure, and it is using OOP. So a lot of my questions are relating to object-oriented programming. Let's see what else I will ask. So I do have some questions about MVC. Okay, here's some more generic questions. What is the difference between QA and software testing? All right, so with this question, I'm kind of looking for somebody to explain to me that QA is something that somebody else probably does, and software testing is something that I, as a developer, probably do. Okay? Then I'll ask, why did you choose PHP as your primary programming language, or whatever it is, Python, Node, whatever. Okay, why do you like it? What do you not like about it? What is continuous integration? Right, have you worked with it? Why is it important? Let's see, so I've got some JavaScript questions, PHP questions. So again, this is like my master list of questions, and I will ask them depending on what your experience is and what the role is that you're applying for, right? So I'm not gonna ask you all these questions if you're like a Python guy. I'm not gonna ask you a question about WordPress, right? But if you're coming in as a WordPress guy, I'm gonna ask you WordPress questions. What is a SQL injection, right? I would hope that everybody kind of has some understanding of what a SQL injection is, whether you're front end or back end, whatever database you're using. It's kind of a very general question, right? And even if you can sort of answer it and you don't sound like you have a lot of proficiency with SQL, that's fine. One of the questions that I like to ask, mostly to back-end people, are, do you prefer to work with relational or NoSQL databases, and why? This is really telling of someone's familiarity of the different types of database structures, and so I like to get people's opinions on these. I will give, if someone is proficient in applying for PHP/SQL, I'll give some examples. Here's a select statement. Tell me what's wrong with it. Tell me why this code is vulnerable, how you would fix it, right? What's the difference between unit testing and integration testing? This is one of my recent favorites because I had been integration testing and not unit testing, so I have to take a little lesson on that myself. Have you done regression testing? And can you tell me what it is? So if you're more senior, then I start to ask a little bit more senior questions like, what are the first things you do when reviewing someone else's code? What do you do to, or what tools do you use to test code quality? And I'll ask you some of my, or I'll share with you some of my less, or these are my, what I call culture fit / soft skills questions. Sometimes because I know people are nervous, I like to start out with tabs or spaces. Everybody's got an opinion. And I just want to lighten it up. This is not a real, like I'm not going to not hire you if you're using spaces. I still love you. You've just been put in charge of a legacy code project with maintainability problems. What kinds of things would you look to improve to get the project on a stable footing? So this is relevant to our product. How would you describe Node.js to a child? Whatever your language is, I'll ask you. Explain that to a child. What is something substantive that you've done to improve as a developer in your career? I go to free code camp meetups. Right? What kind of projects or work do you really dislike and why? What is your perfect job? I think this is a common question. This is one of my favorites. Describe the color green to someone who's blind. See, the reason, confusion, right? Why is she asking this question? What does this have to do with web development? I want to know how well you can think. I want to ask you an just out of the park question and just give you the opportunity. You have not prepared for that question, right? There's no way you've guessed that I'm going to ask you that question. And I want to gauge your personality. I want to see how well you can think on your feet, because you will be given problems in real life that are like this. Explain the color green, right? Yeah. All right, sound frequency to explain the color green. Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Sweet. Yeah, so I am looking for creative thinking with this question. This is a question that you'll probably maybe hear. What is one thing you like most about your current manager? And what is one thing you'd like to change? And that could be, what is one thing you like about your current job and what you would like to change? Something about you can't answer that question. There's someone here that works for me, so we don't want her to answer that question. If you woke up and you had 2,000 unread emails and could only answer 300 of them, how would you choose which ones to answer? These are all subjective questions, right? There's no right or wrong, but I'm looking to see how you think. Let's see. Teach me something I don't know in the next 5 minutes. Now, I actually grabbed that one off Google because I thought that was a pretty cool question. Just anything, any random thing. So interviews with me maybe are not as stiff, formal. I like to inject some informality. And so there are different styles of interviewers, right? You're going to interview probably with somebody who is very cordial and formal, and you may not get cool questions like these. But I like to put people, I'm not saying I'm cool, I guess what I'm saying is that because it's important to me to gauge your personality, I do inject these kinds of questions. And I also like to make people feel comfortable because I know everybody's nervous at an interview. This is another favorite of mine that you'll never get asked on an interview, but I'm going to share it anyway because I love it a lot. If I had an airplane full of jelly beans and I wanted to get them all out, but in a very sanitary way so I could still eat them, what would you do? You have 24 hours to do this, but you have unlimited funds. So I guess these are more like brain teasers, right? And they're ways of, and I've gotten some really interesting answers to that one. That's really fun. Let's see. I also ask questions about leading others, because I'm trying to gauge whether, even if you're not in a position right now, you don't have enough proficiency right now to be a team lead or a senior, I want to know, what your potential is. You've been given 2 projects, they both have to get done, both super high priority. How do you deal with that? Right. Let's see. Oh, and I do have some some whiteboarding challenges, but I don't really have a way to show you. So I'm going to skip that. So I don't want to give away all my secrets just in case one of you guys end up interviewing with me, but there are some of them. And if there are no other questions, I guess that'll do it for me. Thank you. Oh, I should mention, I put up my contact info. Feel free to reach out. I'm on Techlahoma Slack as Mary Licanin. There is a space in there. It's weird, but there's a space. My Gmail, my website, which is kind of codey, kind of personal, it's sort of weird, and my LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out, any questions or anything I can do to help. Hopefully some of this has helped you guys out today. Thank you.